guys, and welcome to my 2025 year wrap. This has been an annual tradition since last year, so I intend to keep going. I'm looking a bit windswept because I have just got back from the cinema and I've just been to see Zootopia 2, and it was really good. It was really good, but now they are closing the cinema forever, so but more about that later. I have got my cup of tea and a box of Romany creams. If you've never seen these before, Romany creams are special. They're special biscuits. They are chocolate coconutty goodness. These used to be the best biscuits you could ever buy in Kigali, and I haven't seen them for years. And they're really good. So what I'm going to go through today is YouTubers I've been watching, films I've enjoyed and series I've enjoyed and books I've enjoyed. And then at the end, we're going to do the 12 Days of Christmas book tag. So let's dive in. So this year, I've kind of felt like the channels that I've really kind of turned to when I've gone online have been commentary channels and channels that channels that are my echo chamber, because I think at the moment there's so much going on around the world, and so much crazy going on around the world, especially from that direction, that I just don't have it in me to listen to more of it. It sounds I know people say you should always listen to things outside of your general areas of interest and your own opinions. But the problem is that when I start to listen to some of those other opinions, I realise I'm a woman of a certain age now. I know where I stand on most social issues, and I have a real limited tolerance for a lot of the that's coming out of a lot of those flapping gums. And I realise that life is very, very short. You're born, you live, and eventually we're all going to expire, and there is a finite amount of time that we have between birth and death, which we do not have any obligation to fill with the and that's not to say that I'm dismissive of other people's opinions, unless they're really stupid opinions, and then I'm extremely dismissive of them. So I'm sorry, I know. One channel that I've watched for many, many years, if you're interested in travel, you've probably come across this, is Chris Broad. So there's a whole load of Japanese YouTubers, and I think I mentioned this last year, is I do tend to watch a lot of those because, I like the way that they present and kind of showcase the country, but they're also just living in the country. So it's talking about where they live and their home and their day-to-day life, rather than kind of overly glossy travel videos. It kind of gives a more realistic look at things. And one thing he said this year was, more than ever, we need to be careful about what we click on. No, don't leave. That's not a cue for everybody to leave. You can if you want. But, the point he was making is that it does matter the media that we choose to consume and the people we choose to subscribe to and the opinions that we choose to give a platform to. And it does matter, and individually, one by one, it's up to us to, let the algorithm know what is okay, and what is not. I mean, it's up to everybody what your tastes are. I'm certainly not going to poo-poo anybody who enjoys watching the occasional video dragging a TikToker over the coals for having, I don't know, what was the most recent one? Put their child in a vacuum seal bag for clout. I clearly enjoy watching those occasionally myself, if only to reaffirm that I'm not the kind of person that would do that. I think it's very similar. Watching that kind of content is very, very similar to watching horror movies. It's nice to have a safe space to watch how awful other people can be and try and judge your own moral character against that, and maybe take some tips to try not to be as awful. Try not to become an axe-wielding murderer. I don't know. That's why we all watch horror movies, except for the really, really twisted people who are watching it to pick up tips. But I think you understand where I'm going with this. It is important to choose what you watch. And this year, I have mostly been choosing to surround myself by people who I feel are sane and rational and whose content in some way is adding something rather than detracting from social sanity. So probably in order of the ones that I've been watching for the longest, the first one is Emma Thorne. She's an atheist who she takes down some really silly Christian channels and religious channels. I don't think they're all Christian, but she just debunks a lot of silly things people say and a lot of scams that the mega churches are running, and a lot of sort of indoctrinative, is that a word? Children's programs that indoctrinate children into slightly weird ideologies. And so, yeah, she doesn't bash religion, but she bashes silly people within those religions. And I really like her content, and she just makes me feel sane and rational when I watch it. Second one is a guy called Jimmy the Giant, and I've only very recently become aware of him. I can't remember how. I don't know. I think I clicked on one of his... He does some slightly, not rage baity, but definitely clickbaity title cards, and I think that I clicked on one of those to see what it was about and just instantly fell down the rabbit hole. He's quite British centric, so he's basically done a lot of videos about social issues in the UK, which I think you can kind of apply to many other countries as well. But what I really like about him is the guy does his research. He really digs into the statistics. Like, when the UK's screaming, immigrants, they're stealing your jobs and your houses and your babies. And, he actually really, really digs into where those statistics come from, how big the sample size was, and what they mean in terms of reality rather than just political rhetoric. So I really do appreciate him, and also because I don't follow British media, I don't watch British news, I'm very, very out of touch. I don't think I could name, beyond Keir Starmer, I don't think I could name any member of the cabinet at the moment. It just isn't something that really impacts my life or that I feel very attached to. And, I've mentioned this in other videos, but when I go back to the UK, there's a cloud of depression over a lot of it. There's a lot of people sitting around going, this isn't very good, is it? This is a bit shit. This is, And I just don't really feel like I need that in my personal space at the moment, which, is not to downplay that people are really living through that and really experiencing those feelings and those hardships and those challenges on a day-to-day. But I'm 6,000 miles away from that. And so I like to keep an eye on what's going on through the medium of either comedy or, Have I Got News For You? I occasionally tune into, but it's getting hard now because as the years go by, I don't get a lot of the jokes. But also I do like topical statistics and evidence-based programming, and Jimmy the Giant does that, and he does it in such a way that he's very relatable. I think a lot of people, even a lot of friends and family would tune out if I tried to talk statistics on immigration or, human rights or whatever in the UK, that they wouldn't listen to me, probably because of my accent and my background, my socioeconomic background, but they do listen to him because he actually came from quite a far right background, and he was very into that, and a little bit, I think he said he was a little bit incel for a while, a little bit supremacist, and he came out of it, he got himself out of that, and therefore he can really relate to both sides, and where people are coming from and where the frustrations and the anger comes from in people that boils over into bad decision making. And so, yeah, the fact I've used the word bad decision making is a reason many people who I would like to listen to me probably wouldn't, but they would listen to him. And so I really like his channel, and I think he talks a lot of sense. And the third one that I have been watching quite a bit of lately is Trevor Noah. So he was host of The Daily Show, but then he's gone off, he's done other things, amazing stand-up comedian. And now he has a podcast. And I think it's called What Now? And I have to be in the mood because they're usually very long episodes, like an hour and a half to 2 hours. But he had Zoran Mamdani on the other day, who's the new mayor of New York. Definitely living in Africa, I feel like I consume so much more American news and politics now than I do British. I can tell you quite a few of the people involved in the American government that I probably couldn't name in the British one at the moment, just because that's the overwhelming global rhetoric you get force-fed America day in, day out. So, you know, but I do enjoy their style of humour as well. Like, I love Colbert, Seth Meyers, I like, Trevor Noah. So I really like his style. I feel he's a very sort of chill individual who gives people space and time to talk. And he picks some really good guests. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was on there, and, you know, we love her. So the world loves her. So that was good. I'd like to see Nnedi Okorafor on there. I'm not sure she's been on, but that would be cool. But yeah, so I've really been enjoying that. And the other day, the one that really surprised me, and this is what I like about this podcast, is I feel like it really exposes me to things that I wouldn't normally know about or hear about. And there's a lady called Dr. Becky, and she gives advice to stressed parents. Sorry, I've got a little fruit fly. And she gives advice to stressed parents. And so, of course, you know, I was like, well, you know, I've not got anything else to do. I'm going to listen to this. And I went into it thinking, this is not going to be for me. Like, I have never wanted children, so I am not the demographic for Dr. Becky. But I came out the other end and I just thought, you know what? I think that's probably the best episode I've listened to so far. She was just brilliant because she also sort of tied it into, as adults, what our childhoods shape in us and change in us, and what we can change and what we can't change, and our instinct reactions and things like that. And I just found it very, very relatable. And I think that's the thing about all three of these. They're very human. You know, there's a lot of humanity in their content, and I've really been enjoying that. Oh, actually, there's one other. There's a lady called Brianne Worth who also talks a lot of sense, especially about sort of male and female relationship dynamics in the modern age. I've really been enjoying her content. So yeah, I guess if you're like me and you want to reassure yourself that the world hasn't gone completely insane and that there are still people out there who are talking sense and, you know, have a bit of self-awareness, I think those are the four that I recommend this year. All right, on to movies and shows this year. I kind of feel like 2025 has been a little bit meh. You know, I think like last year I was so wrapped up in Arcane and Blue-Eyed Samurai, which I think came out the year before that, but I was catching up. Oh my goodness, I loved those shows. I've rewatched Blue-Eyed Samurai. I can't quite bring myself to rewatch Arcane just because it was glorious, but also soul destroying. So I need a bit more time before I can revisit that. But I just feel like this year, there hasn't really been anything that's hit me quite like that. I have literally just got back from watching Zootopia 2 and thank you, because I've got to admit it, I was ready for it to suck. You know, because one of my favourite films is Megamind. And the second one of that, the reviews were so bad, I didn't even watch it. So I was very nervous going into the cinema thinking, you know, but they knocked it out the park. It was brilliant. Loved it. Really, it's fantastic. Keep it up. So I enjoyed that, and like I said, not directly because of Zootopia, but just generally, our one cinema is about to close down. We don't know. It might be taken over again by somebody else. We've got to kind of wait and see what happens. So yeah, this year I'm finding it a bit difficult to find things to really shout about. I think this time last year, Black Doves had just come out, and I quite enjoyed that. It had Keira Knightley and two of my favourite actors, Sarah Lancashire, who she was in my favourite series, one of my favourite series of all time, called Last Tango in Halifax. I love that series. So she was in that, and she's amazing. And Ben Whishaw, who was in one of my favourite films, which is Cloud Atlas, and his part in Cloud Atlas, I sob like a child every time. It gets me every single time. So I love those two, and to see them and Keira Knightley, I think it worked really, really well. I think the interactions were good. Also, I have to mention the fact that I got to see Fleabag. I know that I am years late to this party because I think it came out in 2016 or something, like a really long time ago. Yep, so it did indeed air in 2016, and I've been waiting this long to watch it. So I finally got to watch that because I finally got access to it, and it was as good as everybody says. It was just joyfully brilliant. And I'm glad that they stopped it when they did, because I don't think you could ever improve upon that. And, you know, it was like when they stopped Black Books, because they just didn't want to drive it into the ground. And I think that was important. And I think, yeah, so I'm really glad that I finally got to see that. But basically what I'm saying is one of the best things I've seen this year was made like about like 100 years ago. So yeah, I don't know. It's that kind of commentary on the state of what's coming out at the moment. So a couple of other ones to mention. House of Guinness. Obviously, I watched that. We have a really awful thing here. They actually sell Guinness in cans in shops here, but if it's got a little blue band around the top of it, it's basically, we call it Nigerian Guinness because I think it is made in Nigeria, and it doesn't taste anything like Guinness. But it's kind of manufactured under the Guinness name, but it makes you wonder why, because it does the Guinness reputation no favours at all. It's horrific. Like I took 3 sips and I'm like, can't finish this. So yeah, I mean, I haven't had a pint of Guinness in years. But House of Guinness, I did enjoy it. It felt a bit like a watered down Peaky Blinders, but it was good. But the thing is that Peaky Blinders was pure lightning in a bottle. Like, you could never force that into being. So it does feel like any gangster, kind of period gangster, sort of British gangster drama that comes after that is always going to feel a little bit derivative. But it's really good, and the acting's great, and I enjoyed that. The other one that I've just finished watching was Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. So I've got a good and a bad on that one. I loved that it was pretty much beat for beat the book. It really stuck with it. And I really love series that are faithful, or films that are faithful to the book. And I think it did a brilliant job of that. What I didn't appreciate was the really dodgy CGI. I felt like that just came in like a train wreck halfway through, and you're just like, specifically the wolves. I just think it was tacky. I don't mean to be awful, but it was. And I know that there are a lot of budget constraints now because people are churning stuff out, you know, for streaming so fast that, you know, budget and such. But I just didn't enjoy that so much. It was also like, I adore Gillian Anderson. I will sit down and watch pretty much anything she's ever been in. But I started watching, is it The Abandoned? And 2 seconds into that, they had a horse and a cliff. And again, the CGI was so abysmal, just so distractingly bad that I just went, no, I'm out. Which is sad, you know. I was watching a really interesting YouTube video the other day. Let me just check what it was. So it's a channel called Like Stories of Old, and they did a video called Why Movies Just Don't Feel Real Anymore. And it was looking at the old style of filming and the new styles, so haptic versus optic filming styles. And the old movies, they used to show a lot more of the background. You know, you saw the characters, but you also saw a lot of the background, and so it felt more immersive and it felt like you were sort of in it. Whereas in modern day, they kind of really focus in on the character and blur the background, so it doesn't feel quite as engaging. Go and watch that video, it's really good. Because I hadn't really put my finger on it. You know what I mean? You can tell that something has changed and that something isn't quite, I don't know, you know that something's wrong, but it wasn't till he actually pointed that out that I went, yeah, that's what it is. That is what it is. And I have found myself going back to a lot of older movies this year. So Netflix has been bringing out loads of them, like A Time to Kill, Good Will Hunting, you know, and you go back and you watch the older movies and I feel like I do sort of appreciate the way they're shot a little bit more. So yeah, I don't know. I am somebody who, I'm not against CGI. I think it can be really incredible. Just when it misses by miles, and it can be so destructive to what was otherwise a fantastic film or story. So yeah, I think that was everything I wanted to say about films this year, but I think the next series of Blue Eye Samurai is coming out 2026, so you won't see me for a couple of weeks. I'm just going to be off watching that. So yeah, let's hope for something a little bit more energetic in 2026. Okay, I almost completely forgot the one show that I have to talk about. The one show that has probably defined at least the second half of this year. It's a show I'd heard about, but I'd never actually seen. Again, I'm late to this party because it finished airing in 2022. And I went into it having no idea what it was about. It was on Netflix, Killing Eve. We got to talk about this. We got to talk about Killing Eve. We got to. I'm just gonna say it. Okay, I'm still recovering, I think, from the shock. If you thought it was fantastic all the way through, brilliant. Skip to the next part of the video. Ignore everything I'm about to say, but I have not been that disappointed, that dismayed, and that gut-wrenchingly since Dexter. I mean, you could say Game of Thrones, but I think Game of Thrones is like in its own otherworldly category of gone wrong. You know, I don't think anything else would ever quite reach the levels of Game of Thrones gone wrong, but this is close. It's on my list of the 3 worst nosedives that a series could ever take. Game of Thrones, Dexter, Killing Eve. I don't understand how you can take the most incredible cast. Jodie Comer, just wow. Sandra Oh, Fiona Shaw, Kim Bodnia. I mean, they acted the backside off that. They were phenomenal. I was about to say fucking phenomenal, and then I thought, you know, would I get censored for that? No, they were just absolutely effing phenomenal. And the premise was incredible. It's brilliant. It was fantastic. Just such a good package all round. And the first 2 seasons of Killing Eve were like my wildest dreams come true. They were just utterly phenomenal. And then I've never seen a series go from incredible, amazing, stunning to absolute car crush that quickly, like just off a cliff. You know, what happened? What the hell happened in the writing room there? I mean, I've got to say, you know, like by the time you get to drag Jesus, I'm out. You know, I think it could have been one of the most phenomenal sort of series ever made. But they just turned Villanelle into kind of a caricature, into just comedy value. And I think the whole thing about it, the whole thing that made the series attractive was that she was quirky, but she was serious. you know, she seriously would kill you. And that was what the hook was, you know, that's what drew you in. And when they just made it like, what was this whole sort of born again Christian crap? It was like they had lots of different story ideas. It's the problem I had with Beetlejuice too. They had lots of different story ideas and they tried to cram them all in there, and it just became a nothing. It became a nothing burger. It was, you know, oh, some new characters. Oh, this, oh, you know, it's I'm sick of new characters. Just stick with the original plot. And okay, so I'm in distress over it. I am still distressed by it because I just thought the first two were immaculate, no notes, you know, and then it just went from that to WTF, like that. It's like, I don't know what happened. My two friends, Harris and Rob, they warned me. They said, because in the first series, I'm like, oh my God, have you watched this? It's incredible. And they went, yes, yes, but wait. And they said, you know, season 2, season 3, and I didn't believe them. And then I got to that and I was like, you are kidding me. You threw away a cast that good and a premise that good to do what? You know, I'm sorry, I'm getting very critical about this, but it just broke my heart because I was so invested. I was there for it. Until I wasn't, and then I really wasn't. But anyway, yeah. So I still think the first 2 seasons are worth watching, but then just pretend Netflix cancelled it. Just pretend it's like any other series on Netflix, like there was 1 or 2 really good seasons, then gone. Don't continue after that. But it's a shame because up until that point, brilliant. Okay, deep breath, taking it down a notch. Books this year. There have been a couple of notable ones. I think my all-time pick for this year is a book that came out a long time ago. I can still remember. It's called The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. So the author, Rachel Joyce, was appearing at the Cheltenham Literature Festival in 2012 alongside Sue Townsend, who wrote The Queen and I. And I saw her talking about this book then, and I thought, oh, that sounds really good. And then I never got around to reading it. I think we've probably got a copy at home. I think my dad's probably got a copy. We used to get a lot of the books from Cheltenham and get them signed and things like that. So I think we've probably got a copy at home. I just never got around to actually reading it. And this year, I decided to do so. And it was about a month ago now, and I'm still feeling it. I think that was just one of the most excellent books that I've read in a very long time. So the premise of the book is Harold Fry living his suburban sort of life in a kind of a loveless marriage in England, in a little village in England. And he gets a letter from an old friend, an old work colleague, saying that she's dying of cancer. So she gets this letter from the hospice. And so he sets out to reply to the letter. This isn't much of a spoiler. This is like the first couple of chapters. And instead of posting the letter, he just keeps walking. So he's right down in the south of England and she's right up in the north, and he starts to believe that if he keeps walking, she will keep living. And it's quite it's a really simple idea for a story, but it takes you through so many different stages, and it's a hell of a book, and I highly recommend it. It's tearful and life-affirming. It's a really good book. Second book of note is Rosamund Carr, Land of a Thousand Hills. So Rosamund Carr was one of the last foreign plantation owners in Rwanda. She was a contemporary of Diane Fossey and knew her quite well. And she ended up having a pyrethrum plantation in Rwanda, which are these little flowers that you make insecticide, anti-mosquito repellent from. The stuff that you dip mosquito nets in to kill mosquitoes. And she did that for a long time and then opened an orphanage after 1994. And yeah, I think she died in 2006, I want to say, somewhere around there. But yeah, I hadn't really heard of this book until my friend said, "Oh, have you read this one?" And I went, "No." So I did, and I thought it was really, really good. It was, it spans her entire life from coming here in, I think, 1959, sort of the 50s. Was it 1950? Oh, I need to check. Yeah, try a decade before that. So 1949. And she lived here for the rest of her life. So she was an American lady married to a British big game hunter, moved here with him, marriage fell apart and she stayed. And it was just really, really interesting for me because it talked a lot about sort of late colonial Rwanda and also a lot about the folklore of Rwanda and, you know, what the country was like then. And I find that endlessly fascinating. It was sort of like if you go to the Kant House Museum and they've got lots of pictures and stories about sort of pre and early colonial Rwanda, and then it was like taking that and putting it in a book. So I found that really, really interesting. And then, of course, it carried on into sort of the modern times. So she was one heck of a character, and she saw and experienced so much. And I just really found the book very interesting. And I think if you're interested in Rwanda, it's not a bad one to pick up. So the big one that I finished this year was The Dark Feather, which was the last in the Song of the Drowned trilogy by Anna Stevens. It's a crazy, sprawling, amazing epic saga about the rise of an empire that is controlled by a song, and the song kind of draws you into it. And it's about the tribes and the peoples that get swept up in this empire, and then sort of the eventual showdown with the emperor. It's very, very well written. It's got a very South American sort of jaguar gods kind of vibe to it, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, I think if you're looking to invest in a really entertaining, long entertaining saga, they're quite big books, I think, but it's worth it, and I thought it was worth it. I really enjoyed it, so that was good. I discovered Adrian Tchaikovsky this year. So again, late to the party, but better late than never. Adrian Tchaikovsky writes a lot of sort of, I don't know how you really describe it. How would you describe Adrian Tchaikovsky? It's weird because each of his books are kind of a little bit different. So I guess like fantasy, sci-fi genre kind of, there's probably a better word for it, but I enjoyed his work. I started with Cage of Souls because it was a beautiful cover, and then moved on to City of Last Chances, so that's good. And I also got around to reading the second in the Department of Interdimensional Affairs trilogy. Is it a trilogy? I don't know. I think there's only two books. I don't know. It's a series by Yahtzee Croshaw, and the first one was called Differently Morphous, which I adored. I got it on Audible because I just like the cover, the Audible cover. And the second one is called Existentially Challenged, and I got that on audiobook as well. And Yahtzee Croshaw is just really, really good at narrating his own work, so I thoroughly enjoyed them. They're quirky, silly, they're kind of in the genre of Off to Be the Wizard, or I don't know how to explain them. I just really enjoy them. And a couple of other quick honourable mentions. I read Making It So by Patrick Stewart, because I'm a bit of a Trekkie. And I really enjoyed his biography. I thought there was a lot of very recognisable elements in there that I think my dad would probably really identify with, because it was sort of a northern working class upbringing kind of background, and then he went into theatre and Shakespeare and all of that, and I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was a very nicely laid out biography by a very interesting person. And the other one was a book called Stoner by John Williams. And I'm going to mention this because it's a book that's lodged at the back of my noodle. So back in 2003, when I was travelling down through Europe, I went to see some friends in Narbonne in France, and my friend's nephew was staying. And I've always got my ears open. Whenever anybody's talking about books, I kind of make a mental note about what they're reading, what they're finding interesting. And I remember that his nephew mentioned Stoner by John Williams and asked if his uncle was reading it, had read it. And so I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I know nothing about this book. So I went off to find it. And I have to say, it surprised me. It was quite an interesting book in that it was the story of a man's life. He became a professor of English, and it was just his life from the farmyard where he grew up, through becoming a professor, through academic life, getting married, probably to the wrong woman, and then basically the end of his life. And it was a very ordinary life. There was nothing crazy, adventurous, unexpected about it. But by the time you got to the end, and the way it ended was just, it was a sort of a life-affirming book. Not in the emotional tsunami that Harold Fry was, but in a very gentle kind of life is life and that's okay kind of way. So it was a very gentle story, but I think I took quite a lot from it. So I don't know if you've read it. Let me know below what your thoughts were. I think it's one of those books you could easily overlook and not pick up, or read a few chapters and go, okay, I don't see where this is going. But I'm glad I stuck with it. Yeah. So yeah, those have been my book picks this year, I think. All right, I had to take a quick break to go and feed the cats, and I brushed my hair because I was a right scruff one eye. But I think I'm back now. So let's do the 12 Days of Christmas book tag. Favourite standalone book? The Binding. For years and years and years, it was a book called The Seduction of Silence by Bemla Hunt. And then a few years ago, Neck and Neck with The Binding, and I still can't quite decide, but I have to admit that I've been back to read The Binding more times than I've reread Seduction of Silence, so that one. Yeah, shipping characters, that's kind of a difficult one really. Because basically, if I'm reading a book and I'm really invested in the two characters that I think would go well together, they usually do end up together. So there's no point shipping them because they're already shipped, like prepaid. I guess if there was one unfulfilled shipment, there's a book called Labyrinth of the Spirits by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And I really, really like the character of Alicia Geese. I think she's got like brass, you know what I mean? She's got some guts. She's got some gumption going on there. And she has a partner in crime. So she's investigating this case, and there's an older detective, Juan Manuel Vergas, I think. Juan Manuel Vergas. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or even remembering the name correctly. But I'm not going to go into too much of a spoiler, but there's a bit of a spark you feel might be kind of bubbling up there. And then one of them dies. So, I don't know if you can actually put that one forward, because I don't think you can actually ship a corpse. I think there are laws against that. So, I don't know. But that would have been one that I would have liked to have seen kind of blossom a bit more than it did. It felt a little bit unresolved and unfulfilling. But I don't know, like all of the other main characters that I kind of feel would go well together tend to end up together, or if they don't, there's some really good reasons why they don't, and I don't feel like you should sort of override that. So I don't know, I think maybe there's more sort of film and TV characters that I think would make interesting matches than fictional ones. I mean, television and film is fictional. I'm not going insane. I don't think television and films are real. What I'm saying is that I think that there are more television and film characters that I would ship than there are literary novel and... Somebody finish my sentence for me. I would probably say Diane Wynne Jones, the Castle in the Air trilogy, which has Howl's Moving Castle, Castle in the Air, I think is the second one, and House of Many Ways. But I'm a little bit hesitant because, yes, it's a trilogy, but in the loosest possible sense. Like there's kind of a thread running through and occasional cameos, but I don't know, they're not particularly gelled together in terms of a continuation of a story. So I do think, certainly most recently, the Song of the Drowned trilogy, I think it was just so complex and so intricate and well thought out, and you know, the characters in that were really vivid and real to me. So yeah, I think Song of the Drowned trilogy would be the one. Yeah. Ooh, my favourite fictional beast. Insibika, from the Rwandan story Margaru and Insibika. So Margaru and Insibika. Margaru is a warrior. His name, I think, means long legs. And Insibika is the fictional beast. And the reason that I love Insibika, I don't know, that looks a bit more like Bigfoot to me. That's not how I imagine Insibika to look. But Insibika is a shapeshifter, and Insibika can take on the shape of whatever you desire the most. So if you're thirsty and you need water, Insibika will be a pot. You know, if you're hungry and you need to go hunting, then Insibika becomes a spear. If you're feeling horny and you want to meet somebody, then Insibika becomes a beautiful woman. So it takes on the shape of whatever you most desire to kind of draw you in and catch you. So I'm a big Insibika fan. Okay, show 5 golden books. This one almost completely stumped me, because when I read it, I thought, I haven't got any golden books to show you. What are you talking about? And then I thought, oh, maybe there's one on my shelf. Now, my bookshelf is tiny. I have a very small bookshelf. I own very, very few physical books because they're not easy to come by here. And so I went to have a look to see what I could find. And I'm not kidding you, so many books on my shelf have got golden writing on them. You know, like that golden kind of detailing that catches the light. Most of them just on the title. But I'll show you the 5 most golden books I found. The Art of Hearing Heartbeats. The entire cover has like this golden kind of sheen on it. It's really pretty. The camera doesn't entirely pick it up, but it's very, very pretty. By Jan-Philip Sendker, and I haven't read this one. Chasing the Sun by Richard Cohen. Again, the entire thing is golden shiny. I bought this years and years ago when we had a supermarket called Nakumat, which is closed now, and I still haven't read it. The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill, which is golden in colour but also has the golden highlights. And it also says here, winner of Canada Reads 2009. So it's got a gold medal on it. And I absolutely love this book. This is a heck of a book. Even more impressive, it's a man writing first person as a woman. And I couldn't tell. Absolutely knocked it out of the park. And we mentioned Carlos Ruiz Zafón and golden book, Shadow of the Wind, which was the one that kicked off the entire 4-book quartet, I believe. And also got a gold medal, Richard and Judy's Book Club 2005. Love it. And last golden book is one that I absolutely adore. It's called The Silk Roads, A New History of the World by Peter Frankopan. Absolutely fabulous, fabulous story of, you know, the old trade routes between Asia and Europe, which they transported gold along. So that's a brilliant book. But then I realised there are even more. So Jonathan Livingston Seagull has got an entirely golden spine on it. This is Mary Beard Women and Power, which my Auntie Helen sent me, and that's got gold on it. One of my other favourite history books is The Borgias by Christopher Hibbert, sorry. And that's got a very stylish golden title. And then finally, China Medieval, This Census Taker. Again, it's got a very, very golden, glittery thing on it. I am surprised because literally when I read that, 5 golden books, I was like, I haven't got any golden books. And now I've realised I've got lots of golden books. So that's 5 and then some. So my rotten egg, I don't enjoy doing these kind of questions because, you know, I always feel like an author has tried. Whether they hit or miss, they've tried. So it always feels a bit unpleasant just to completely crap on them. But still, you know, I am a writer myself, but I am also a reader myself, and it's fine to have opinions. Have to just remind myself of that occasionally. The one that I'm going to pick is a book called The Redemption of Althalus. I had to look up that title, by David and Lee Eddings. Now, I really like my fantasy and my sagas and my romps around sort of made-up worlds and adventures and all of that. I love it. But this one was just an absolute bum trombone note for me. It was like, oh no. And the problem was, it's a really, really thick book as well, really thick, from what I remember. And the problem with it was, actually, I'm going to cop out here. I'm going to totally cop out here. I read a review that somebody else wrote about it and they hit the nail on the head for me. So the other reviewer was a guy called Adam Renwald, and basically he said, I like the evil side to be just as intelligent as the good side, an even match so you question the ending. But in this book, the bad guys, as they so often refer to them, are, well, stupid. They're incompetent bumbling fools held together by an evil god who never makes an appearance. That summed up my problem with it. It was like every single challenge that they encountered, every single foe, every single enemy they went up against was just dumb, you know? And it was like every single sentence was the setup for a joke, you know? And I like a bit of humour. I love Terry Pratchett. I love Yahtzee Croshaw. You know, I like humour in my crazy stories. But it was just wearing, you know, and there was some kind of sexist stuff in there about, like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I remember thinking it was kind of like, oh, aren't women funny? Ha ha ha. It was like, it was written for somebody at home in their bedroom, you know, playing text-based adventures who didn't have boobs, basically. And I just kind of read it and I thought, no, it doesn't really hit for me. So, yeah, that's my rotten egg. So a book with water on the cover, when I was going through my bookshelf, I actually came across one. It's quite subtle. You almost can't see it, but that's water. It's a lake. It's a reflection of the building above. And this book is legendary. If you haven't read this book, read this book before you die, because it's amazing. It's thick, but it's worth it. You just go through it like the guy wrote it, I think, was he in prison in India? And the guards, every time he started writing it, I think he completed it, and the guards tore it up and burnt it and destroyed it, and he had to write the entire thing again from memory. I mean, that is dedication. It's kind of like a guy who kind of got a bit sort of swept up in gangland India, and it's just good. It's a good book. It's a good one. when I think about fictional feasts and fictional food, there are two books that kind of really spring to mind and punch me in the face. The first one is a book called Lights Out in Wonderland by DBC, Dirty But Clean, Pear. And it's just, oh my goodness, it's a hedonistic, debaucheristic kind of orgy of food and fantastical celebration. It's a bit crazy. And I think on the back of the book there's a quote I always remember, which is, we will be destroyed whether we like it or not. I say, let's like it. It's just, it's one of those gritty kind of fun books. And the other one is, I think it's a short story, a novel, short thing, by Karen Blixen, who wrote Out of Africa and has an entire suburb of Nairobi in Kenya named after her. And it's called Babette's Feast. And it's about a woman who can turn really ordinary meals into whatever you most desire, sort of food that kind of evokes childhood memories and, the most deepest kind of emotions in us. So I love those two books relating to food, but I kind of went and did a bit of research, and I think even though some of the dishes that are in those books are fantastical, they're all actually real foods. I think in Lights Out in Wonderland, it was something like a milk-fed white tiger cub and a giant panda paw. And in Babette's Feast, there's a lot of French food in there. But I don't think that they were actually fictional foods in themselves. So the one that I'm going to go with is I'm going to go with the strawberry jam from Jam by Yahtzee Croshaw. And the reason that I'm going for this is because the entire story is about a guy who wakes up one morning to discover that the world has been kind of half submerged in killer strawberry jam. Like, you touch it and you're dead. Like, you cannot touch the strawberry jam. So I want to know what that strawberry jam tastes like. Is it worth dying for? Dance between two characters. I think maybe the vaudeville kind of music hall scenes in Tipping the Velvet. I love that book, and I love the BBC adaptation. I've said before I named my car Kitty after Kitty Butler, which was the character played by Keely Hawes, and I love that, and just the costumes, and you can almost smell behind the scenes and the chalk dust and the grease paint, and it really evokes something. And yes, it's two women in sort of music hall era, and I love the kind of freedom of expression that the dancing gives them to dress as a man or dress as a woman and just express themselves. And years ago, somebody put on YouTube, they did a mashup of Tipping the Velvet, the BBC adaptation, to Tegan and Sarah's Come On. And there's two versions of that song. It's the earlier version of that song, and they just did it in perfect time, and it was just like, mwah. It was transformative art, but I think it probably got a copyright strike, and it has never been seen since, sadly. But yeah, it was really good. Favourite book to movie adaptation? I guess I can't say Tipping the Velvet because that was adapted to a BBC series rather than a movie, but it definitely ranks very highly. But I think I like the classics that remain quite true to the book. So I think Wuthering Heights, the 1992 version with Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche, or Binoche. I'm never sure, is it Binoche or Binoche? But I thought that was a wonderful adaptation because, like Frankenstein that I mentioned earlier, it was beat for beat the adaptation of the book, whereas previous adaptations had pretty much, like the one with Laurence Olivier, had pretty much entirely focused on the love story between Heathcliff and Cathy and then kind of forgot about the rest of the story, whereas that version with Ray Fiennes and Juliette Binoche, that really took it to the end of the book, and it showed you the revenge that came after that. And I thought, I loved that adaptation. But I think my favourite book to movie adaptation of all time, it's probably going to be Cloud Atlas. I've got to say, it was a damn clever book. And I'm going to say, I thought that the adaptation was actually just even a little bit better. I thought there was a more satisfying ending to a couple of the relationships in the film that weren't entirely there in the book. They're very different experiences, because when you're reading the book, you see a lot of the language play and the clever wording that goes into the story that you can't see in the film. But in the film, I thought that the relationships were a bit better developed. So yeah, you know, two different mediums, but I really, really like the Cloud Atlas adaptation. It was just clever. Favourite book to movie soundtrack adaptation? That one really stumped me for a minute, because there are loads of films that I adore the soundtrack to. You know, some really amazing soundtracks. But most of those were never books. So I really had to think about this one quite hard. And the one that I came up with is, I don't think you can get better than Forrest Gump. I mean, who have you got? You've got Leonard Skinner, Jimi Hendrix, Canned Heat, The Doors. You know, what more could you possibly want on a soundtrack than that? My favourite book ending. This one's too difficult. This is too difficult because, you know, you have different types of endings for different books, because you need different kinds of endings, you know. Life has got millions of different types of ending, and if you were only ever allowed to pick one, it's too difficult. I like something life-affirming. A bit like The Pilgrimage of Harold Fry that I mentioned, you know, something where you end up having a really good cry, but after that, you take a deep breath and it's like, oh, I feel better that I've read that. You know what I mean? I feel like that added something to my life. It's too hard to pick just one. There are so many. I guess a book that is emblematic of that would be The Lovely Bones. The Lovely Bones by, I've forgotten the author, Alice Sebold. How could I forget Alice Sebold? Yeah, so The Lovely Bones will be one. There's also a book called The Generation Game by, I think it's Sophie Duffy. And that's another one that's got a kind of a, ending, you know, where you kind of, you know, you feel like you've walked through the fires of hell to get there. It's not that bad, but you know, you have a good cry, there's snot and tears, and then you come out the other end and you kind of like brush yourself off, and it's like, I feel stronger for that. So those are two books that sort of exemplify the type of ending that I like. Okay, I think that's the 12 Days of Christmas book tagged. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and everything that's been wrapped up. Let me know your favourite YouTubers, books, series, films of this year, or what you've been watching this year. It doesn't have to have come out this year, but let me know what you've been reading and watching this year that you've enjoyed. And let's come back and do it again next year. Mwah!